Hello, everyone. My name is Steve Akley. We've got a special virtual bourbon event tonight. This one's a little bit different than anything that we've ever done. I would say that all of our events to this point have been focused on the whiskey. The whiskey is important in this one, but in reality, we're more excited to hear about the stories. The stories are going to be what this one's all about. So we've got Gregg with us, and he's going to be telling us all these excellent stories from many years in the whiskey business. Gregg, you started in 1978, correct?
That's correct, Steve. Right out of college, I was fortunate enough to get a job with Seagram's, Joseph B. Seagram's son in Louisville, Kentucky, as a frontline supervisor.
Yep. And Gregg Snyder, you are the master distiller for Chicken Cock at this point. And we'll kind of talk about all the companies you work for and stuff like that in just a second. But at this point, that's what your current gig is, right?
Yeah, I actually have a consulting business, and one of my consulting gigs is serving in the role of master distiller for Chicken Cock whiskey that's owned by Grain and Barrel Spirits.
Very cool. Very cool. And your other stops along the way, your first stop you said was Seagram's, but you've been at a couple other places too that'll kind of play into the stories that we're going to be getting.
Yeah, I was very fortunate early on at Seagram's when I started there. If you were hungry, you wanted to learn and pick things up quick, they gave you an opportunity. And I was kind of placed on a fast track where in the 5 years at that plant, it shut down actually in the early 80s, but in 5 years that plant was open, I virtually had an opportunity to work in every department, from distillery dryer house to the barrel warehouse, filling barrels, putting barrels in the ricks, taking barrels out, dumping barrels, gauging tanks, filtering, processing, blending, receiving, shipping, bottling, quality, maintenance, you name it. I worked in every department at that facility in Louisville. And it was a great training ground. And when they shut the plant down, I had an opportunity to relocate, but I was going to end up in New York City at the corporate offices. And that was not my game plan at the time. I really didn't want to go to New York City at that time in my life, wasn't set to. And shortly thereafter, I went to work for Brown-Forman. I actually started out as their managing their bottling operation on the afternoon shift. Did that for a little over a year, and then I was promoted. Was responsible for all the dry goods, all the glass, labels, bottles, anything that bottling department needed. I was responsible for making sure we had it when we needed it and had plenty to fulfill the production requirements. Got a promotion after that. Likewise, picked up all the wet goods. In addition to the dry goods, I was responsible for the early times warehouse. Any tank trucks coming down from Collingwood with Canadian mist in them that we bottled. Tank trucks coming up from Mexico with tequila, we bottled Pepe Lopez there as well. And then I got a promotion, and people thought I was crazy. They asked me to go out to the cooperage, Bluegrass Cooperage that Brown-Forman owned at that time, and be director of operations. And as I said, people at the corporate office thought I was crazy. That place was like stepping back in time, and and it was hot, it was dirty, it was smoky, and pretty nasty. And but I told people, I've learned how to make good whiskey. I've learned how to age good whiskey. I know how to bottle it, ship it. So it's high time I learned a very important aspect of it, and that's the barrel side of it. 60 to 70% of the flavor in a bottle of whiskey actually comes from that white oak barrel. And so that's an important aspect. And 9 of the 12 years I worked for Brown-Forman, I actually managed their cooperage operation. So I learned quite a bit in that time frame, and it carried over with me throughout my career and was very beneficial. But I left Brown-Forman in 1998 and became the vice president of Austin Nichols and the managing director at the Wild Turkey Distillery. Was there for a little over 10 years in that capacity. And from there, I went up to Lewiston, Maine, and worked for a company called White Rock Distilleries as their plant manager up in Lewiston, Maine. Privately owned company, and they had a number of different products. Three Olives vodka was one of the big products they had before I started working.
Okay.
But when I started there, they had a product called Pinnacle Vodka. And I'm sure most people are familiar with Pinnacle Vodka. We kind of developed the dessert category of flavored vodkas during that time frame, and flavored vodkas were booming back at that point. In 2012, Jim Beam acquired Pinnacle Vodka and the plant assets and a small rum brand. And Beam asked me to move back to the Kentucky area and head up the transition of those brands into their Frankfurt facility. So I did that, took a little over a year. And then I got an opportunity to go to work for a company in Bowling Green, Kentucky called Western Spirits. I was their vice president of operations. And I live in southern Indiana, right across the river from Louisville, Kentucky. and Bowling Green's about a 2-hour drive. So it was a little bit too far to commute every day. And so for a little over 3.5 years, I was living and working in Bowling Green during the week and then driving back home on weekends. And after 3.5 years, it just kept getting more and more difficult. So I decided to ramp up my retirement plan, and that was not retire, but to start my own consulting company. And I love seeing the bourbon industry booming, and I felt now was the time to take advantage and share some of my years of experience and knowledge with people wanting to get in the business. So in June of 2017, I started my own consulting company, and Grain and Barrel Spirits was one of the first customers I actually picked up, helping them with a couple issues they needed, some help with supply chain and some operational issues. But Marty Antela, the founder of Grain and Barrel, he shared his vision with Chicken Cock whiskey. You know, he acquired the brand rights in 2012 and set out to generate cash flow, which he did by buying some young whiskey and turning cash over pretty quick. And it served its purpose, but it didn't help the quality reputation. And Monty always had the vision to resurrect it back to Kentucky and bring it back to its high quality reputation that it once had many, many years ago. A lot of people don't realize it's an old brand that originated in 1856. And so it's not a name that we just concocted and came out with a whiskey. It's actually an old brand, has a lot of neat history and pre-prohibition, prohibition, post-prohibition. So that's kind of what I've been doing the last 3.5 to 4 years is helping them resurrect the brand, and we're getting close to taking it nationwide. That last year, I think at the beginning of January, we were in 12 to 14 states. At the end of 2020, we're in 40 states and growing. So it's got a lot of momentum, and it's doing great.
Cool. So, along the way, you got to meet a lot of cool people. So we're going to talk about them in just a second. We do want to get a whiskey going here. So, Greg, what would be the first one? We've got the rye, we've got your bourbon, and then we've got the righteous blonde. Which one do you want us to try first here?
Yeah, I like to try the bourbon first. Our Chicken Cock Kentucky Straight Bourbon is typically the best one to start with. Okay. And what can folks expect as they go ahead and pour this into the glass? And well, just to kind of give you, we started the resurrection actually of Chicken Cock whiskey back in Kentucky in 2018. I actually negotiated a contract with Bardstown Bourbon Company, and so that's where that's our home. That's where we're making Chicken Cock whiskey and aging Chicken Cock whiskey, and soon to be bottling down there too, hopefully. But anyhow, in the meantime, as that's properly aging. And I taste it every 6 months to see how it's progressing, and it's coming along great. But the first whiskey we probably won't dump until late next year. It'll be 4 years old next August. And so not sure if we're going to blend it with some of our older inventory. But in the meantime, this is some good quality whiskey that I was able to acquire and put under the Chicken Cock label to kind of bridge that gap until ours gets mature enough. But this particular bourbon you're tasting tonight, this is actually a blend of 6-year-old and 15-year-old. Okay. I can share some notes with you, but I like other people. I like to get other responses. But all right, as you guys taste that one, what are you guys thinking? What are you getting on the taste there? No samples, Lenny, I assume.
I totally did get samples, but I screwed up and I left them at the rack house.
Oh,
I got a lot going on this week. I will absolutely taste them tomorrow morning.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Other than Lenny, what is everybody getting on the taste of this one? Anybody got something?
We're all just too busy enjoying it. We're
there you go.
Take a break here to talk. So we just keep drinking.
All right, Katie. Katie, what are you getting though? Any flavor things you want to share to get
I've had the Chicken Cock before. But just right now, actually, I was getting some banana, which I've been in a banana mood lately, so I don't know, that could be. But anyways, I'm thoroughly enjoying it. So that's quite delightful at the moment that I got it first. That's interesting, Katie. I don't get banana, but I've had a number of people. They really feel it's got the banana flavors to it, and that's the unique thing about tasting. There is no wrong or right answer. What you smell, what you taste is going to be different than anybody else. But
But yeah, I've had a lot of people comment that they pick up banana notes in it as well.
Okay. I mean,
Got a sweetness to it, like from honey.
Yep.
honey. Okay.
It's got some honey notes to it. Yeah, yeah.
Honey and a little bit of pepper is what I'm.
Yes, I got the pepper and a little bit of and some smoke too. Very nice.
Mm-hmm.
I'm getting a lot of oak, but it's softened somehow. It's like you can taste age, but there's something in there that's dulling the impact, so it doesn't just hit you.
To me, that's some toasted oak lactones that they're not overpowering. It's a lot of times, and I don't know about these barrels, but one of the things we're doing, and I can get into that later, Steve, if you want, about the barrels. I actually personally select the logs and then oversee the quarter sawing of the logs into stage and heading and the air drying and actually the construction of the barrels. But we actually toast our barrels before. Now, of course, this wasn't this. This is the stuff we've got aging in the warehouse right now. But by actually natural air drying, you leach out a lot of the harsh tannins. The tannic acid can be really bitter and harsh. And when you get that heavy oak flavor up front, a lot of that's a tannic acid. So this has a pretty nice mild, and for having some 15-year-old in it, 15 can get over oak. But this 15-year-old actually was aged on the lower level of the warehouse, so it ages a little bit slower.
The trees that you select, they aren't on the south side of the mountain from the Ozarks, are they? Because we had an event last night, a guy literally said that he makes sure that that's where he plucks the trees from, because
actually it's just the opposite. We're one of my earlier clients that I picked up right off the bat when I started my consulting company. Was a group of guys in White Sulphur Springs, West Virginia.
Okay.
And a bunch of guys that are the members at the Greenbrier. If you're familiar with the Greenbrier Resort out in White Sulphur Springs, that's about all there is there. The rest of that area is pretty economically depressed. And these guys were trying to come up with a business to create jobs for that area. And actually, one of the guys is a gentleman by the name of Tag Gallion. Tag was one of the co-founders of Smooth Amber Distillery, right outside of Lewisburg, West Virginia. So the Tag was telling him, in 2014, he had a hard time getting barrels. And so, they said, why don't we look at building a cooperage? And, they said, here in these Appalachian Mountains, we got all kinds of white oak that's being shipped overseas, and we need to use it here. And so anyhow, I got connected through a friend of a friend who's another consultant, and he called me and said, man, this is right in your wheelhouse with your experience. So I connected with these guys and did a market feasibility study, which showed that with the demand for barrels, with the bourbon boom going on, that the demand was going to exceed the available supply very shortly. And that actually happened in 2019. But since then, some of the cooperages have expanded and added on. And so, they've got, the supply is caught up with the demand. But in the meantime, these guys build a cooperage. I helped build a stave mill. Like I said, I taught their employees how to quarter saw white oak, how to properly edge it up, how to properly stack it and air dry it. And then likewise, when the cooperage, I helped them, give them some guidance on what equipment they needed and some of the processes to do it right and control the process. And so they have a state-of-the-art cooperage right there in White Sulphur Springs. It's right off I-64 if you ever get in that area. But back to your question, Steve, one of the beautiful things about West Virginia Appalachian Mountain region, 50% of the trees are on a north-facing slope. So they're not getting the sunlight that the other trees are. Okay. Now, likewise, in those Appalachian Mountains, I don't know if you've ever been through that area, but it is rough and rocky as can be. There is no fertile soil in that area. And so just from the terra firma, it's going to grow slow. And by tight grain oak, by industry standards, 10 annual growth rings per inch. If you look at the end of the log, you can see the annual growth rings. 10 annual growth rings per inch kind of denotes a tight grain. Trees coming out of the Appalachian Mountains, they average at least 12 to 15 and probably more in many cases. And so what you get there is you get such a high density, high concentration of the hemicellulose and the lignin that are so critical that when you build the barrel and toast it properly and then later char it, you're converting that hemicellulose into caramel flavors, and the lignin gets converted into vanillin or vanilla flavors. And so that's where your caramel and vanilla flavors actually show up in whiskey. So we can do a whole seminar, a whole nother session on that if you want to.
Yeah. Oh, heck. I think we're all interested in the barrel and that, because as you said, it plays such an important role in taste and flavor. So yeah, we'd love to bring you back on for that. But today, our focus is the people. So I'm going to throw out the first names with you. You mentioned the fact you worked for Wild Turkey, Austin Nichols, and the Russells. Let's hear about Jimmy and Eddie Russell. What do you got with those guys?
Well, my fondest memories. I mean, Jimmy's. I had the fortunate opportunity of working there for 10 years, and Jimmy and Eddie both reported to me during that time frame. But Jimmy's like a brother. I mean, I'd do anything for that man. He's such a great guy, and he's truly the last of the true Mohicans when it comes to the old master distillers that grew up with corn dust under their fingernails and really made the stuff himself. But one story that I can recall, and it actually kind of ties into Jimmy's makeup and demeanor, but it also includes Booker Noe in this story as well. So. If you recall, back in 1999, Buffalo Trace came about, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Actually, Mark Brown, who's the CEO of Sazerac, Mark and I, we worked together at Brown Forman, and Mark left in 1997. We worked in different areas. He's one of the most brilliant marketers I've ever met and worked with, but just a heck of a marketer. And Mark left in 1997, became the president and CEO of Sazerac. I left in 1998 to go to work with Pernod Ricard and Wild Turkey. And anyhow, in 1999, they changed the distillery from, I believe it was called the George T. Stagg distillery at that time, and they changed it to Buffalo Trace. And they came out with Buffalo Trace bourbon. Now, every year with the Kentucky Bourbon Festival, and it rotates. Each distillery has an opportunity year after year to host what they call the VIP press party. People like yourself, Steve, or anybody in the media or publications would come in, and the distillery would host them and kind of give them the grand tour and just have a nice cocktail party, what have you. And this was usually happened on a Friday, the Friday of the weekend of the festival. And I'll never forget, 1999, Buffalo Trace was hosting that party. And I was pretty busy that day. I got there a little bit late, and I walked in right as Mark Brown was going up to the podium, and he was, greeting everybody and welcoming them and kind of giving his spiel. And when I walked in, there's a table there with bars set up, and I see Jimmy and his wife, Jaretta, standing about, 20 yards away from that table. And so, I was kind of curious. So I'm going to try one of these Buffalo Trace. So I went up and ordered they had these little plastic cups basically, and I ordered a Buffalo Trace. And I always smell it before I taste it. It's just habit, I guess. But I put it to my nose, and I could not believe it. And please understand, I don't bash other people's bourbon, but this was bad. This was so musty. I was shocked. It smelled like mothballs. I mean, if you ever had that smell, you know what I'm talking about.
Right.
It was nasty. And so I said, well, maybe it tastes better. And I took a sip, and it tasted worse than it smelled. I could not believe they came out with this new product called Buffalo Trace Bourbon. And we're offering this to folks. And when I tasted it, I looked up, and Jimmy just kind of came in a little scowl, and he just kind of shook his head no. And I have to agree with you. I went over, and I went straight to the trash can and dumped it in there, which I don't do often, okay? Very rarely. And I walked up to Jim, and he said, "Can you believe that?" And I said, I was shocked. And I don't know if it was, the grains that they used were mildewy, or my thoughts are they had some warehouses that had gotten flooded from the Kentucky River when the Kentucky River flooded. And they actually floated barrels out of the ricks. That's how deep it got.
Wow.
And so I'm just wondering if some of that whiskey hadn't got. Now, don't get me wrong. Buffalo Trace today is awesome. It's delicious. They've done a great job of resurrecting that. But when they came out, it was pretty bad. So leads me to the next part of the story. So the next night was the Black Tie Gala event. And for those of you, I don't know if anybody's been to the Kentucky Bourbon Festival, on Saturday evening, they have a big Black Tie Gala. Back then, I think we had about 1,200 people attending, but the first hour and a half is the distilleries that participate. They set up a booth, and you can have a tasting. And basically, people are coming in before dinner's served, and the band starts playing, and dinner's, people start eating dinner. They can do a tasting and taste everything, just about everything that was offered, any bourbon that was offered in Kentucky at that time. And so prior to the doors open, you know, we're all in there kind of in our tuxedos and formals and so forth. And we're making up the last minute touches to our booth. And you got to know Jimmy. Jimmy's a prankster and loves to joke around. And so he said, Greg, he said, come with me a minute. I said, okay. So he walked across the floor and he went over to Buffalo Trace's booth and he got a sample cup of the Buffalo Trace bourbon. He says, watch this, follow me. So, okay. So we went back across the floor and went to Jim Beam's booth. And that year they kind of had a mock-up of Booker's house. I don't know if you've ever been to Booker's house, but got the old white columns on the front and the wooden porch and had rocking chairs. Well, walk up there and Booker's in his tuxedo and Fred's and sitting in a rocking chair and Fred's right next to him. And Jimmy walks up to Booker and he says, hey, Booker, you tried this new bourbon yet? And old Booker in that old gravelly voice, no, Jimmy, what is it? No, I said, this new Buffalo Trace. And you got to know Booker. Booker never nosed it. He never sipped it. He just threw it back. And so he gave it to Booker and Booker threw it back and his eyes got big as saucers, man. And he spit that bourbon out all over the floor. And he goes, damn you, Russell, what are you trying to do? Kill me? And so we had to get some paper towel and clean up the mess. But yeah, that's kind of Jimmy's nature. He loves to poke fun and have a good time. But he and Booker were like brothers, and they were very close as well. So
yeah, and I want to go back to a statement you. Jimmy actually reported to you, and if so, what was his year-end review like when you had to go over how he did this past year?
You know, you can imagine. I mean, when I started there, Jimmy probably traveled 75% of the time doing promotional activity in that. And that actually grew as time went on. But yeah, I mean, you know, Jimmy's great. There's none better, and his performance evaluations were awesome every year. And,
you weren't like assigning them. We just got to get your knowledge up a little bit. So well, you're doing good, but education's key.
Yeah, it's you know, that was the easy evaluation.
I guess so. Yeah.
But you know, it's funny, Steve. We went to I'd go to promotional events every now and then. And every year I'd go down. We were a sponsor of the National Wild Turkey Federation. And a big sponsor, and I'd go down there every year and take several of the employees, because we had set up a booth in their exhibit hall, and we sold some of the gift shop items there as well. But anyhow, you know, there was a number of times that you know, we'd be at the Wild Horse Saloon doing a wild turkey promotion or whatever, or one of the local establishments, and people walk up to me and just, you know, people are so enamored with Jimmy, and they'd walk up to me and say, man, you're one of the luckiest guys in the world. I said, well, yeah, why is that? He said, well, you know, to have a job and be able to work for a guy like Jimmy, man, that's got to be great. And I just grinned. I said, yeah, it sure is. It's awesome. You know, I wasn't going to burst their bubble. You know, that's what people thought, that Jimmy managed the whole operation. But again, aside from that, we all worked together closely, and you know, I think I learned a lot from Jimmy, of course, as well as everybody else did. So,
and what's Eddie like on a casual basis? I mean, he's always such an interesting person, because, you know, his father still looms over him, because he's, like you said, he's one of a kind. Jimmy Russell's one of a kind. But Eddie, you know, has been doing this over 40 years. I mean, he's a legend himself, though. I don't know that people automatically think of him, because when you think of Russell, you think of Jimmy right away. But
well, you know, I mean, no disrespect to Eddie or Fred. No, I mean, those guys aren't the men that their dad were. And like, I'm not the man my dad was either. Okay. So again, I don't mean any disrespect, because Booker and Jimmy grew up in an era that was totally different. But, you know, Eddie was kind of quiet. I mean, when I started there, he kind of managed our warehouse operation. And so he was more focused on the maturation side of the business.
Yeah, absolutely. So the No family, you got to hang out with Booker, and what was that like? Was it as fun as it seems? Because every story I hear about Booker is hilarious. Was it just always that awesome?
Yeah, Booker was, you know, call it like you see it kind of guy. He didn't mince words. He didn't hold back, and he'd tell you like you saw it. You know, if it included a few expletives, then, you know, so be it. But you know, he got his point across. But a great guy. I mean, very, very transparent, and you know where you stood with him. But yeah, I think I shared a story with you when it was the week of 9/11, 2001, And, you know, the tragedy happened, and a lot of the distilleries were kind of pondering whether or not we should even, because the Bourbon Festival was later that week.
Yeah.
And so, you know, everybody was wondering, well, you know, maybe we should just cancel everything, because all the flights were canceled. You know, we had so many people flying in that couldn't come in now. And so I was on the board of directors of the Kentucky Distillers Association at that time, and we had a kind of an emergency meeting, we called. And because a number of distilleries were thinking about, no, it's just canceled. We shouldn't be, you know, celebrating during this time. And that morning, President Bush came on the air, and he said, you know, we can't change our lives. We can't allow, you know, these terrorists to think that they had an impact on changing our lives. We've got to keep on going, living the way we'd want to, and the way we had planned and intended to. And so the Bourbon Festival went on, and it was definitely more somber, very patriotic, and but totally different from you know, festivals in the past. And that Friday we had planned Wild Turkey. We had planned on having a dinner with some of our folks that were coming in town, some marketing folks and some guests. And of course, they didn't make it into town because of the flights were canceled, and basically the same with all the distilleries. So Thursday night, our crew was down setting up the booth on the lawn, which all the distilleries kind of set up their own booths, sell their gift shop items and what have you. And Jimmy and I were walking along, and we ran into Booker, and we got to chatting, and you know, Booker says, you know, what are you guys doing, you know, tomorrow night? I said, well, our plans got canceled, Booker. I said, you know, the flights being canceled and so forth. He said, yeah, it's kind of what happened to us. We said, we're going to have a barbecue out in my backyard. He says, why don't you guys bring your wives and come on over? I said, you know what? I don't think we got anything going. So yeah, I appreciate that. We'll do that. So that Friday evening, we went to Booker's house, and we parked out in the street, and we're walking down his driveway, and Booker's backyard's got a wooden fence around the back, and there's a gate coming off the driveway into the backyard. And so my wife and Jimmy and Jaretta, we walked up there, and we got up to the gate, and they were doing a prayer vigil for the victims of 9/11. And so we waited till the prayer got over, and then when they finished, we walked through the gate. And as you walk in the backyard of Booker's house there, as soon as you walk through the gate, there's stairs that go up into the house. As we're walking in the backyard, I hear this gravelly voice, Greg, Jimmy, come on up here. And so I look up there, and there's Booker up in the kitchen. So our wives go into the backyard and mingle with everybody, the other guests and that. And so Jimmy and I go up in Booker's kitchen. And he's there with John Boswell. John at the time was the owner of Independent Stave Company, the largest barrel company in the world. And John and Booker were
he's got some stories, by the way. Yeah, if we ever get into his stories.
Yeah, that's right. Yes, he does. But they were sitting there sipping bourbon. He said, sit down here. And so he had all kinds of bourbons and stuff that they were working on, and some stuff that people had sent him. He had a bourbon from Oregon, I think, that we tasted. But we were sitting there sipping bourbon and chatting, and then, you know, Booker and Jimmy started telling stories, and that's when you just turn into a sponge and you soak up all you can, because those guys, I mean, they have some great stories, and it was just a very memorable evening and a very tragic week. But it was quite the thing.
Yeah, so a little bit of levity in a you know, very tough time is great. Kind of brings things a little bit back to normal. A question for you, and this one, because, and you mentioned people like Fred Noe and Eddie Russell, and, you know, kind of the next generation after these really great distillers, and they come in at a different era when it's a little bit more PR focused and interviews and get out on the road, and people are a little bit different. But I think one that's really bucking that trend is Freddie Noe, is Fred's son. And, you know, what's your first time you ever met Freddie? And because he is very different, he's almost like Booker, and he has this constant thirst to learn about distilling, and he goes and he meets with craft distillers and wants to learn what they're doing and see what he can apply to a big company like Jim Beam. So tell us a little bit about Freddie, you know, what he was like. And I'm sure he was a kid in some of these stories, but tell us.
Well, that's just it. Yeah, he was so small and so young back in those days that you know, I hung around with Booker and that. So I really haven't been around Freddie as he's grown, but you know, he seems to have you know, taken the no name and taking it to another level. So that's great. I'm glad to see it. You know, he seems to be doing very well with the brand.
Yeah, that's cool. What about Elmer T. Lee? Did you know him at all?
Absolutely. Yeah. Elmer was another dear friend. Share a story with Elmer. Again, dive back into the Bourbon Festival. Every year when I was at Wild Turkey, we'd rent out about half the rooms at the Hampton Inn there in Bardstown.
Yeah.
And Sazerac or Buffalo Trace would rent out the other half. But I'd always rent a room on the first floor there, one of their meeting rooms. And we kind of set it up as a hospitality suite. And so, the Bourbon Festival back then, it'd run from like Wednesday through Sunday. And after the days or evenings events, we go back there and the guys from Buffalo Trace would come down. And of course we had bourbon and wine and beer all iced down, and they would bring some bourbon and we'd sit there and we may stay there till 2 o'clock in the morning, just telling stories and sipping bourbon. But Elmer would always join us. And my story with Elmer, I can vividly recall, was he came down one evening and we were sitting there sipping some bourbon. And I told him, I said, you know what, Elmer? And for those people that never met Elmer, he was a true Kentucky gentleman. I mean, little short guy and always wore that chapeau cap that he's known for. And, he had a smile that could light up a room. But we were sitting there and sipping some bourbon. I don't really recall what we were sipping that night, but I said, Elmer, what? I got to tell you something, pal. I said, you know what? One of the best bourbons I ever tasted in my life was. He said, no, what's that? I said, a Blanton Single Barrel. And, man, he just lit up from ear to ear. He just grinned because, Elmer created Blanton's.
Yep.
And, but I said, you know what, Elmer? I said, I also got to tell you something else, pal. I said, you know what? One of the worst bourbons I ever had was a Blanton Single Barrel. And he looked at me and he says, what do you mean, Greg? I said, exactly that, pal. I said, when you guys came out with Blanton's, you went to a section of the warehouse and you said, okay, these barrels in this section, we're going to use that for Blanton Single Barrel. You didn't taste every barrel. And at Wild Turkey, we were the same. We were guilty as in the same mode with our Kentucky Spirit, because we just pulled a section of the warehouse we thought was the ideal spot, and we just selected. Nowadays, of course, their process changed, our process changed. We're actually tasting the barrel, and before we actually approve it to be dumped for single barrel. But back in those days, I mean, it was a difference between night and day. And even today, I mean, most single barrels, that's my only rub with single barrels. I love single barrels, but most of them, they can be so inconsistent, barrel to barrel to barrel.
Oh, yeah.
You can take the same whiskey from the same batch and put it in 2 barrels that came from the same cooperage and the trees from the same forest, and age them side by side for the same length of time, and they can be distinctly different. 2 ends of the spectrum. But so with single barrel, that's why it's important to do the quality up front and taste it before you actually dump it and bottle it. So yeah, that's my Elmer story. He the other time it was a number of social functions we get together, and that was always fun to look forward to hanging out with Elmer.
Did you ever go fishing with any of these guys? Because I heard they all like to fish, and sometimes they'd even get the whole group together and go. Which I mean, that's a reality show that should have happened. That should have been all. That should have been recorded.
No, I don't recall ever fishing with any of them, quite honestly.
Okay.
But at the end, I'll tell you a story about Harlan Wheatley almost drowning the Elmer one day. That's another story.
All right. Oh, that sounds like a good one. We might want to hear that. Oh. We do want to drink. What's our next sample would be the rye. So
okay, so yeah, we're going to try the rye next. Pour it actually.
Right.
Should be able to tell right away. This is a rye. It's got those grassy notes that a typical rye does, but
yeah,
this is a 95.5. It's 95% rye, 5% malted barley. And as I tell people, when I worked at Wild Turkey, we made a rye at Wild Turkey back in the late 90s and 2000s. And it just, I didn't care for it. It had such a harshness, bitterness. It had like 35% corn in the mash bill, and it had a harshness to it. And Jimmy didn't really care for it either, quite honestly. But today, some of these 95.5s are just spectacular. And this was actually part of our collaborative relationship with Bardstown Bourbon Company. This was made at Bardstown Bourbon Company.
Okay.
And so again, I mean, I'm interested in comments, but I get a lot of spice, a little pepper, and then when you hit the tongue, some of that spice and pepper comes through. But then on the back of the tongue, the sweetness really kind of opens up from the caramel vanilla note.
Gosh, that's good.
I get a lot of black tea on this one.
Black tea.
That's interesting. Yeah.
That is interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I had grapefruit on the nose, but not on the taste.
I get a little citrus on the nose. You know, a lot of
Okay.
people, that's pretty common.
I get pickles on the nose, but thankfully none of that in the taste at all.
I've had people say that people say, you know, dill pickles. Some people get spearmint or mint flavors.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, it does give you the spice up front, sweet at the back. It's
I love the sweet finish it has. I mean, it's pretty amazing.
mhm.
Again, I mean, some of these 95.5s that are being offered in the market today are just phenomenal. And this one, I'm so proud of it. It really turned out great.
Yeah, the finish, the spice that you get kind of stays kind of front of the tongue to mid palate, and at the back, it's all just a sweet finish, not anything, but it kind of has a little bit of a delay, and then kind of warms you up to them too. So it's very good.
And both these, the bourbon and the rye, are 90 proof, by the way.
Okay.
And just a side note to you, I don't know if everybody has a bottle or just a sample, but these bottles, the rye and the bourbon, one's green label, one's a blue label. These are actually replicas of pre-prohibition bottles that Chicken Cock was bottled in. And then later on, the Righteous Blonde, likewise, it was a replica of pre-prohibition bottle. Back then, they were pint size, and basically we just enlarged them to a 750 and kept the same. But on this bourbon in the rye bottle, if you look closely, it's got a honeycomb embossing on the glass, and that mimics chicken wire.
Okay, that's what they're trying to do with that. Gotcha.
It's a cool bottle.
That is very cool.
We get a lot of compliments on the packaging, but it's can't take credit for it. It originated in the early 1900s, actually.
Cool. Have you ever tried any of that whiskey from back then? You know, you think, well, you can't do it, but then you never know. This stuff turns up. So have you ever tried any of the old?
I have not. You know, there's some bottles down at the Oscar Getz Museum in Bardstown, Kentucky, and I don't know if you've been there or not, Steve. But
yeah, I've been there.
Yeah,
cool.
it's you know, they've got the entire history of the whiskey industry in Kentucky, and they have so many neat old pre-prohibition bottles. And Chicken Cock, they've got a number of Chicken Cock pre-prohibition bottles on display down there. Don't know if they're willing to sell any to try it, but
I doubt it. Yeah. But I don't know. I don't know if we ever, like I said, it sounds impossible, but then you just never know when someone finds something like that. So if they do, I'll give you a call and we'll make sure you're there. If get any of our friends to find something like that.
Yeah, boy, yeah,
that would be cool. All right, just kind of continuing on, you know, you spent time at Seagram's. When I think of Seagram's, you know, back in the day, and you even talked about maybe moving to New York at one point, Jim Rutledge comes to mind right away. So what was it like working with Jim?
Well, you know, I started with Seagram's in 1978. Actually, let's see, Sunday was my 43rd anniversary in the industry, actually. But when I started with Seagram's in Louisville, Jim had been working there, and he had left a couple of years prior to that, and was working for Seagram in New York City at the corporate offices. And so I had met Jim on a couple of occasions through events when he would come back to Louisville. So that's really when I first met Jim. But when Seagram shut down their Louisville operation, and I think I mentioned earlier, you know, I had an opportunity. Actually, I was going to move to Lawrenceburg, Indiana, and manage their Shannon, Ohio warehousing operation for like 9 to 12 months. And then they were going to move me to New York City. And that's all they had to tell me. I ended up taking a severance package and got my MBA in a year's time, and Seagram paid for it, and then went to work for Brown-Forman. But shortly thereafter, Jim came back, and a gentleman by the name of Ova Haney actually managed the what they call the Old Prentice Distillery. This is before it was called Four Roses Distillery.
Yep.
And Ova's one of those classic old master distillers. You know, he didn't go by the term master distiller, just distiller is what they called it. But Ova was a good one. I mean, he made some great whiskey, and you know, I think the original Eagle Rare was actually produced at that distillery many years ago, and was an awesome bourbon. Man, it was so good. But Jim came back to Kentucky and ended up managing that operation. And then Seagram's decided to recreate Four Roses as a bourbon. Many years ago, Four Roses was a bourbon. And then I guess during World War II, they ended up changing and making it a blended whiskey. And of course, its sales really dropped off. It was still a bourbon over in Europe. I think you could, in France and in I think Japan, where a lot of the troops were during World War II, they could still buy it. But in the States, they changed it to a blended whiskey. And so it's once great quality reputation. When it changed it to a blended whiskey, it kind of lost all that glory it once had. And trying to bring it back to a bourbon was probably one of the most difficult things anybody could ever try. But, that's where Jim Rutledge stepped in. And I have so much admiration and respect for Jim. He worked his tail off to make that happen. And thanks to Jim Rutledge, Four Roses is booming today and is a great. Now, he had a great team as well, John Ray and Al Young and people that worked over there were awesome. And but Jim single-handedly, I mean, when I say single-handedly, he managed the operation, but he was out late at night, everywhere anybody would listen to him, promoting Four Roses as a bourbon. And he did a phenomenal job bringing it back and resurrecting its quality reputation.
Absolutely. Yeah, he's an interesting character too. You talk about a straightforward, no bullshit, straight shooter. That's definitely Jim Rutledge. So we've had him on a couple of events with us, and he is a very enjoyable speaker too. Just like hearing him talk.
Yeah.
You mentioned Ova Haney, and that's someone that I have a thirst for knowledge about, because there's not a whole lot out there about him. He was, he's not ancient history by any means, but he was kind of before the internet was a big thing. So I think there's a whole generation, and Four Roses is as popular as any brand right now, but I don't think a lot of even these big Four Roses fans knows who Ova Haney is. So is there any stories you have about him? Because apparently he was a character.
I met Ova a couple of times and was more familiar with the whiskey that he made, because most of that, was aged in either at their plant there in Cox, or the warehouse in Cox's Creek, or we aged some of it actually in Louisville. But we bottled everything in Louisville. And like I said, I'm more familiar with the bourbons that he made. But yeah, Ova was one of those classic guys that didn't get a lot of recognition, but he knew what the heck he was doing.
Absolutely. He got the ultimate recognition, and is a Kentucky Bourbon Hall of Famer. But yes, he I'm just kind of forgotten, which is unfortunate, because he was apparently a great character, and one who notoriously battled it out with the accountants. That's what he didn't like, is the people other than not the distiller controlling things. It was the bean counters that are controlling things. So yeah,
that happened. Yep, for sure.
All right. The next one is, when we talk about people that I'm infatuated with, the next one I want to ask you about. Absolutely. I mean, everything that I hear about this guy, you talk about an innovative mind and someone who's really even changed the industry today, even in the last thing that he did with his Angel's Envy. I mean, literally, if you talk about finished bourbons and things like that, nobody was doing that stuff until Angel's Envy. Now everybody does it. There's not a big distiller, there's not a craft distiller that they're not, doing these secondary finishes. And he really kind of got that thing going. But tell us about Lincoln Henderson.
Lincoln was quite the wild card. He loved to have fun and enjoyed a good party and enjoyed a good drink. But when I worked at Brown-Forman, Lincoln actually worked and managed the quality lab, and the research lab, and very innovative. An out of the box thinker. We had both actually served on the maturation committee together. Along with a guy by the name of Willie Pratt. I don't know if you're familiar with Willie. Willie was the original distiller at Michter's, but Willie worked at Brown-Forman then as well. And the three of us, along with some other folks, served on the maturation committee. And we did so many different research projects and experiments with barrels and maturation and what have you. But Lincoln was quite the guy. When Brown-Forman reacquired the old Bourbon Grand Distillery, because they owned it many years ago and then sold it, and it sat there and was kind of rotting and falling in, but they reacquired it in the mid 1990s and spent about $20 million to refurbish it. And Lincoln, he was tagged to be the master distiller for Woodford Reserve. Of course, it was called LeBron Graham. Now it's called the Woodford Reserve Distillery. They changed the name to match the brand. But Lincoln, the best story I can tell you about Lincoln, we went round and round one time because I was on the executive production committee, and never forget, we had a meeting shortly after Brown-Forman had reacquired the facility. There was an old white house where the visitor center sits today. And I mean, I stepped up a step and about went through the floor when I stepped in the building. It was pretty dilapidated, and they'd seen better days. But anyhow, Lincoln had been given a directive. You know, they're going to do triple pot stills. They want to do something unique, and with that directive, they wanted to distill it as close to 160 as they could, because you know one of the criteria to be a bourbon whiskey, you can't distill it higher than 160. And he was we were chatting one day, and he was kind of sharing me. I said, Lincoln, don't do it. And he says, Greg, he said, that's the directive I was given. I said, man, you're going to strip all the flavor out of that whiskey. And he says, yeah. He says, I tend to agree with you, but you know, with these pot stills, you know, that's kind of new territory, because most everybody in the bourbon industry had used column stills.
Right.
So that's, we said, you know, that's the kind of directive he was given. So kind of speed up story, 1996, we had a big event and grand opening, and Paul Patton, who was governor of Kentucky at that time, came down, and he and Owsley Brown signed the first barrel that was filled, and they had a big ceremony. And so that was 1996. Of course, day one, you could buy Woodford on the shelf.
Right.
That same day, right? Well, what they were using 7.5-year-old Old Forester, in which I love Old Forester.
Sure.
And 7.5, because Old Forester is about a 4.5-year-old bourbon back in that time frame. Okay. And 7.5-year-old Forester was absolutely delicious. And I really was a big fan of Woodford. Well, fast forward 6 years later, 2002, and the first barrels that they filled were now 6 years old. So we're going to start dumping these and using them as Woodford Reserve. And the first barrels they dumped were not good. I mean, they stripped the flavor right out of it.
Yeah.
You know, and it's tough, you know, in the corporate politics and to be politically correct, and kind of, you know, the last thing you want to do is tell the executive committee of Brown-Forman, no, you're crazy. That just didn't happen. You know, you were
Right.
politically correct, and you were given marching orders, and that's what you did. But Lincoln, to give him full credit, I mean, he's so innovative. As you said, he kind of, with Angel's Envy, when he got involved and retired from Brown-Forman and hooked up with some folks and started Angel's Envy, and then started doing some of the finishing products. You're right. He kind of kick-started a new realm of our industry.
Yeah. Every once in a while, you know, Mike Veach, you know, reposts this stuff, and every once in a while he'll share the story of Lincoln Henderson, so innovative. And, you know, one of the things he tried was charring coconut husk and running the whiskey through this charred coconut, just because he's always trying different things. And Veach says that was some actually pretty good stuff that actually did take on a little slight hint of coconut. I just think it was so cool. I would love to have been friends with that guy as he's experimenting and saying, hey, try this. I just did this. See what you think. I mean, that would be cool.
Lincoln was so much fun. God rest his soul. He, like I said, he's an out of the box thinker. I mean, again, with the maturation committee, we did so many experiments with various wood flavorings, and a lot what Maker's Mark's doing today with Independent Stay, where they're actually, you can select how you want your whiskey finish with, you know, cherry staves or maple staves or birch or different types of wood that have been toasted with inserts and finished in a barrel with inserts in them, with those different various species of wood to create unique flavors. So, but yeah, Lincoln was the father of all that, I believe.
Yeah. The next person I want to ask you about, and I don't know this individual, never got a chance to meet him or anything like that, but Parker Bean, what was he like?
I met Parker when I was working for Brown-Forman at the Cooperage, at Bluegrass Cooperage, and back then, we made barrels for everybody in the industry, not just, Jack Daniels and early times, Old Forester, and then eventually Woodford Reserve, Brown-Forman companies. We made barrels for everybody. And we sold probably over half of Heaven Hill's barrels they bought. We sold them to them. And that's when I met Parker, when I was in the barrel business. That was part of the beauty of working in that function. Not only did I get to learn so much about the barrel and the importance of the barrel, but I got to visit all the distilleries in Kentucky, and I got to know these people and got to taste their whiskeys, and so it was kind of some of the perks that a lot of people don't know about that I truly enjoyed. But Parker was a quiet guy, and he loved a good bourbon as well. And typically, when in a social event, we get together and he'd actually seek me out in the crowd at the Bourbon Festival a couple of times, and he wanted to come over, and the first thing he wanted to talk about is barrels. I mean, he was really focused on them, and what do you think about this, Greg, or what do you think about that? And always loved chatting with Parker. His wife Linda, I mean, together those two, they loved to party and knew how to party. So we always had good times, but I never really spent as much time with Parker as I did, say, with Jimmy and Booker, Elmer, some of the others. But again, just one of the true classic master distillers that this industry is blessed to have been a part of the industry and touched so many lives.
Yeah, definitely. A person who still looms large over Heaven Hill, and he hasn't been there for many years at this point, but yeah, he is one of the all-time greats for sure. And I don't know that he'd be too into as we go through these things and we start talking about the flavors we're picking up, because I know notoriously he wasn't big into tasting notes. He didn't, he would always say, we don't put French toast in there or whatever, we're saying baked apples.
You hit it on the head, man. That's Parker. He didn't mince words. He just either you liked it or you didn't.
Right. He's a thumbs up, thumbs down guy. Yeah, that's
exactly.
That's a tasting.
It's not,
right?
Oh yeah, I get eucalyptus.
Right.
Whatever, No, it's not.
Yeah.
That wasn't Parker.
Yeah, I saw some really big news today. I don't know, kind of slipped under the radar. At least I haven't seen it out there. I'm sure someone has it out there. And I was busy today. It wasn't, I don't know, social media, but yeah, Craig Beam got picked up. So that's interesting, right? I mean,
yeah, I guess he's doing some consulting work or whatever. Craig still, Parker and Craig have been managing a trucking company. Yeah, Harvest Grain for many, many years. I mean, they were Heaven Hill's primary trucker for grain. And they still do that today. So I don't know. That kind of shocked me, actually. Maybe Craig's a great guy in himself, and kind of surprised me that he took on that task, because he's got a pretty full plate.
I would guess so. And the rumors are that distillery is cursed and all this stuff, because that's been open, that's been around for many years, and people have tried to get it going, they couldn't. Then they were going to be like, well, this is going to be like a little mini MGP, it's going to be a production facility, and it's never really taken off, and it's been around for, I don't know, 20 years or something crazy. And
down in Hickman, Kentucky. That's down in the western part of the state, southwestern.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see what they have in mind, what they're going to be doing with Craig. It's so funny because, we've been talking about him recently. I for one of our podcasts, I did a list of people that I'd like to talk to, and Craig Beam was on there, and I had no idea he was involved in this one. He had his father, of course, was loomed large in the industry. He had a great career. He had a title of master distiller at one point. I wanted to talk to him, and now maybe he'll be willing to talk. He's got a new gig, so hopefully that's one that can happen. So we'll see.
Yeah, good guy. He's a great guy.
The last one that I've got, and then of course we do have a couple other segments. We've got the wild card segment coming up where you can talk about any stories of anybody and then of course we'll have a Q&A with the audience as well. But the last name that I've got on my list is Bill Samuels Jr., certainly one of the true characters from the industry. He's fun to talk to, but have you ever spent any time with him?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, Bill. Actually, I had the pleasure of going to Bill's house for dinner one evening when I worked for Jim Beam. The short period of time I worked for Jim Beam, of course, they owned Maker's Mark at that time, and got invited to a dinner at Bill's house. And he and his wife, very gracious, have a beautiful home right off the Ohio River, and he's got quite a collection of Maker's Mark bottles in his house too.
Yeah, I guess.
But, Bill was one of those guys that, he's not only done well in promoting Maker's Mark, but he's always been a true ambassador for the industry. Mm-hmm. He's traveled the world and promoting Maker's Mark, but he's also been out there, working on supporting legislation and getting people to support legislation for the industry and what have you. And he's always been a good ambassador for the industry. And I have a lot of respect for him in that regard. But Bill, there was at a time when Brown-Forman, I think it's actually before I started working or right after I started working there, Brown-Forman had an opportunity to buy Maker's Mark. And I think it was before they actually went with Hiram Walker. But anyhow, I don't know what happened exactly, but the Brown family and the Samuels family didn't see eye to eye. And so that didn't come to fruition. But Bill took opportunities to kind of needle Brown-Forman from time to time. And imagine that. But when I worked at the cooperage for Brown-Forman, we made all the barrels that the Maker's Mark bought. They filled. We actually, that time frame, we were making all of their barrels. And so I'd get down there quite a bit. And actually, Bill Paget, who was their VP of operations, I don't know if you know that name or ever met
Mm-hmm.
Bill, but Bill actually was the VP of operations. When he retired, they hired Dave Pickrell to fill that role. But anyhow, every year, Maker's Mark would have a Kentucky Oaks Day brunch. You know, the Friday before, the first Friday in May or whatever. If May, first Saturday in May is on May 1st, it's the last day of April. So it's always the day before Derby Day, right?
Yeah.
And so they always had this big party, big brunch. And since we supplied in barrels, I would always get an invitation. So my wife and I, for several years, we'd go down to Bill's and Maker's Mark brunch. And every year he had a different theme. One year, I guess he felt compelled to needle Brown-Forman a little bit. And so he sent out these invitations and he said, come meet Jack Daniels at the Maker's Mark distillery. And I'm thinking, okay, what's this all about?
Right.
And so this is way before they had any of the current facilities and so forth. You had the old White House kind of set up on the hill, and they mowed a big open lawn there where most people parked. And then you'd walk up this long driveway to the house, and Bill and his wife are usually there greeting everybody. Well, that day, Bill was dressed like Jack Daniels. You know, the old statue of Jack Daniels. He looked the spitting image of Jack Daniels. He had
like a duster coat and all that kind of stuff.
Exactly. And he had the, the goatee and the mustache and everything. And then they also were serving some of the Jack Daniels cocktail, the old Lynchburg lemonade and the Tennessee tea and what have you. But it was always a great brunch. And again, I never did get the connection, but he always had a way of kind of getting under Brown-Forman's skin. And actually, as the truth be known, I think that's one of the reasons why Brown-Forman ended up buying the old LeBroy and Graham distillery, because they wanted to create this own country distillery, is something beautiful and extravagant, and kind of show up Maker's Mark as well. I think there was a little rivalry there as well. So
yeah, where you walk away and you're talking about the grounds and the experience of visiting as much as you are, what they're making there. Yeah. I always say out of the living bourbon celebrities that are out there, I think Bill Samuels Jr. might be the one that would make the movie about his life that would be the most large scale appeal. Now, for the true whiskey geeks, you probably want to learn about Jimmy Russell and when you're talking about living legends. But I think for the mass market, Bill Samuels, because he drove Colonel Sanders, he was a rocket scientist. He has all these amazing stories and things like that. There's rumors he had Elvis played a birthday party one time and all this kind of crazy stuff that I think would make a really great movie. But yeah, he's just lived this incredible life.
He's very charismatic. I mean, I don't know how many of those stories are actually true.
Right.
Some may be a little embellished, right? But
yeah.
It's hard to say. But he's quite the character, and he's done well for not just the brand of Maker's Mark, but for the industry.
Intern at the White House, and then he said he was too old. Other people were like high school kids. He was college, so they had him do something else. He worked at the patent office, and of course, Maker's has a patent on that dripping wax. Supposedly that's how he met the people that was able to get that approved and stuff like that. It's just a crazy life and yeah, incredible stories around that guy. So and a great speaker. So he's definitely one. If you ever get an opportunity to go to a Bill Samuels Jr. event, don't miss out on that for sure.
Indeed.
All right, we do have a couple other segments I want to get to, but we have our last tasting here, the Righteous Blonde. What are we going to be in for with this one, Greg?
Okay, so yeah, I don't know if you've seen the bottle. This one here, this is it's got a starburst embossing, and it's got the old metal jigger cap cork finish.
Yep.
And again, this is 90 proof. So this is something that we did. It's a collaboration. It's actually the second collaboration we did with a company called Goodwood Brewing Company.
Okay.
They're based in Louisville, Kentucky, but they have breweries and restaurants. Oh, got one. They just opened one up in Indianapolis. They got one in Frankfurt. I think they got one up in the Cincinnati area of northern Kentucky, but they've got several. And what we did is on this collaboration, called Chicken Cock Righteous Blonde. I don't know if you can see Righteous is spelled RYETEOUS, kind of get the word across. This is a rye whiskey. So in this collaboration, I gave them 6 freshly dumped bourbon barrels, and they aged the blonde ale. Basically, they age all of their beer in bourbon barrels.
Okay.
And so they aged this blonde ale in our bourbon barrels. 8 weeks later, they dumped the beer out, and I got the barrels back, and I put rye whiskey back in these barrels. And I tasted every couple of weeks to see how it was progressing. And I felt it was a little after about 5.5 months old. I felt it had saturated all the flavor it was going to get from the blonde ale. And so that's when we bottled it. This is a 90 proof. We were trying to come up, just like we did with the first collaboration, come up with something a little bit unique. And put your nose to it first. And anybody? One of the things that I noticed, I pick up right away is the malted barley. You get some of that malted barley from the beer, and that'll actually reconfirm itself on the taste as well. But you can tell it's rye.
Mm-hmm.
Any other comments on the aroma?
Kind of reminds me of like a vanilla cream soda.
Vanilla cream soda.
I've had that before. Yeah, I've heard people talk about that.
Yeah, I'm getting that in somewhere between like a creme brulee kind of. That's that
creme brulee. That's it. That's the key I get.
I got cola.
Cola. Yeah. I was going to say buttery.
Mm-hmm.
When I first nosed it, I got like a honey bun.
Honey bun. Okay.
Cool.
Well, this all sounds pretty good. Let's give this thing a try and see. Those all sound delicious. So let's see what we got here. Oh yeah, that's really good. That kind of even evolves in your mouth. I mean, just you talk about a layering of flavors. You get a little bit of everything in there. You get like a honey bun type of thing, but then you get some orange in there, and yeah, it's some cake. I mean, that's good. Some like Werther's candy is in there. Yeah.
I love it. Unfortunately, it was a limited edition. There's still probably a few bottles out there to be found, but it was a limited edition, being only 6 barrels. But I love it for an after dinner drink. If I've had a great meal, I'll just pour some in a Glencairn and go outside and sit and listen to a little music and sip on that. And I mean, it's got such a nice sweet finish, but that's, like you said, so many layers, so much complexity. It's just, I love it.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot there. I would even say some grape taste for some reason. So yeah. What else are you guys getting on that one, on this?
Pretty much everything you said, I was like, yep, that's in there too. Yep, that's in there too. That it really does have all of it.
You can taste.
It's like thicker. You just like taste like the layers of it, like a big thick cake with just like different flavors in between each layer.
It does kind of separate for you. It's not like it's like everything's thrown at you once. It kind of goes through an evolution in your mouth. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I can taste the rye we just drank. Like I can taste the base spirit, and then you can feel what it added to it. What changed? It added some more vanilla. It added more creaminess. It added more mouthfeel.
That's exactly, you hit it right on the head. What I try to do in finishing a product in a barrel, because I'll tell you right now, we've got actually back in May, finally received 25 rum barrels. I'm finishing a rye whiskey in a rum barrel, and I nosed each one of the rum barrels to really make sure it had that sweet flavors, because I felt the spiciness, pepperiness of our rye would really pair well with some of the sweetness. But you hit it right on the head. You want the base whiskey coming through. You just want to enhance the flavors of the base whiskey. You don't want to overpower it or overtake the profile. You just want to enhance the base whiskey. And I think that we accomplished that with this. I intend to do the same thing with this new rendition we've got working on right now.
Cool.
Hey, Greg, what I love about this is that it is sweet, but it's not overly sweet. It makes that rye sing, but it doesn't, make it a maple syrup. It is delicious. It's flavorful, and it doesn't hit that sweet note for me. That's just like, oh, I can't drink anymore.
Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, great comment. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm along the lines with Barry there. I can't have anything that's too sweet, and that's why these people who try to give you that, what's that, peanut butter whiskey? Oh my gosh, how can you drink any of that? Screwball, how can you drink that? That is so sweet. I took one taste of that because someone told me you're really gonna like it, because I do like peanut butter. Gosh darn, how can you drink that stuff? I don't understand. Maybe in a like a milkshake if you're gonna make it, maybe, but just drinking that stuff. What do you do with that? I don't know.
Are you going to call the new rye Rastafarian?
That's a good a good name. We've come out with a couple of them. We're still on the drawing board, but I like that, Jason. That's probably what we need to add.
Rastafarian, add it to the thing. Hey, Jason offered that up. There's nothing he can do now.
It's not Jamaican rum. It is Caribbean rum, but it's not Jamaican. So.
Okay. All right, we've got the Robinsons there. They have they got a barrel pick named after them at a Neely family distillery called the Robinsons. So yeah, they get to play that game as well. So they had a barrel named after them, which is cool. Well, with that, Greg, it's up to you. Sometimes you might have a good story that I don't know to ask for because I don't know all your stories. So, is there anything that I missed? Because there's a lot of people we've left off, and I know big names that you work with, Chris Morris, and all these kind of great people. Is there any stories that we missed? Something that you want to share?
Well, I touched on it earlier. I think so. I'll finish the story I was going to tell about. Harlan Wheatley just about drowning.
Yes.
So
yeah, don't leave us hanging there.
We'll circle back to that. When I was at Wild Turkey, it's funny because we were buying all the barrels at that time from Independent Stave Company. And prior to me starting there, I was actually a competitor. Matter of fact, on all their facilities, their two cooperages and all their stave mills, they had no trespassing signs, and actually had my name written on it, no trespassing sign, along with a few others. But they were trying to keep everything close to vest. They didn't want anybody coming in and stealing their technology and that. So when I started with Wild Turkey, and we were sourcing all our barrels from Independent Stave. And I got talking to Brad Boswell, who's John Boswell's son, and Brad runs the company now and has done a fantastic job and is doing a great job. He's such a brilliant young man, and he's done extremely well with the company. But anyhow, I was talking to him one day and said, I'd like to come tour your facility down in Lebanon, Kentucky, and just kind of see that you're following our specifications and what have you. And of course, he was. Oh yeah, no problem. Well, the day before I was supposed to go down there, I get a call, and it's John Boswell, his father. And John lived down in Palm Beach, Florida, and he's calling me from his house down there. And I said, Greg, he said, I understand you're going to be visiting our cooperage tomorrow. I said, that's right, John. And he says, before you do that, he says, I'm going to ask you to sign a non-compete clause. And I said, excuse me? And he says, yeah, he says, there's three people in this world that I'm concerned that could come into our facilities, see the technology we're using, and turn around and build their own cooperage, and compete against us. I said, well, I'm going to take that as a compliment, John. I said, I'm your customer now. I'm not your competitor.
Right.
And I expect to be treated just like any other customer. So I'm not going to sign a non-compete clause. Now, as far as me learning your technology and starting a cooperage, that's something to keep in the back of your mind, because you know what? Pernod Ricard has a lot of money. And if your quality ever goes to hell or your prices go out of sight, then you know what? I can help Pernod Ricard build a cooperage. And so anyhow, long story short, I ended up going, and no problem. I didn't sign anything and got the tour and saw their facility. And again, and Brad and I are good close friends, and I've taken him turkey hunting, taken his son turkey hunting, and we're pretty close. But they always had every other year they would have what they call a oak symposium out in Missouri.
Yep.
And they'd have winemakers and whiskey makers coming in because they sold wine barrels and whiskey barrels. And we did some experimentation. They made some French oak barrels for the whiskey industry, gave us all the distilleries French oak barrels, and we were aging. And so we'd get together every 2 years and we'd taste them and see how they're doing and progressing. But it was very educational for a lot of people. You know, they'd take you out to the woods where they'd harvest white oak and kind of show you the trees and talk about the trees and the chemistry of the white oak. But they interjected some fun with it. So on this particular day, they had a river rafting excursion, I guess. So they hauled us all in a bus. You're talking about Craig Beam earlier. I remember Craig was on there. He probably got a little too overserved before we got there because we were passing bottles around on the bus. And so we get there, and you could either get into a raft or a canoe, or depending on how many people were in your group. And in my group, I had Joe Darman. I don't know if you ever remember the name Joe Darman. Joe was the VP of operations at it was Ancient Age, and then I don't know, it was several names: Leestown, George C. Stagg, of course now it's Buffalo Trace. But Joe was the VP of ops at that time there, and then Doug and Willie Taylor, who owned Speyside Cooperage at that time. At that time, it was just a used barrel operation in Scotland, but Doug and Willie were over here. And so the four of us got into a raft, and I didn't want to get wet because most of these people had been way overserved already, and they were looking to get wet. And so we took off and got way in front of everybody. And Elmer T. Lee was there, and Elmer and Harlan Wheatley get into a canoe.
Yeah.
And they start paddling. Of course, everybody just taking their paddles and splashing people and just getting drenched. And again, we tried to stay way ahead of all that. Anyhow, there never was any real rapids, but there were some areas because the river was a little bit swollen, and there were some fast areas, you know, but not real rapids. And so they got going, and there was, you know, little islands of brush and here and there, and somehow Elmer and Harlan got to going, and they tipped the canoe over. Now, everybody's in life jackets, of course. You couldn't get out there without a life jacket on. And so the next thing you know, Harlan pops up, and the canoe's turned over, and he grabs on the canoe, and he's looking for Elmer, and he can't find Elmer. And man, he's panicking. He's thinking, oh my God, where's Elmer? Where's Elmer? What have I done? Where's Elmer? Well, Elmer apparently popped up right underneath the canoe that had turned over. So he's hanging on underneath the canoe, and they're floating down this river. And I mean, Harlan is panicking. He thinks that, man, he just drowned, you know, the master distiller, and he just don't know what's going to become of it, you know. So, but eventually they get down there where it gets shallow, and they kind of turn things over, and there's Elmer, you know. So, but yeah, so there's a number of stories like that have happened over the years that, again, I've been so blessed to work in this industry as long as I have, and meet the people I've met over the years and learned so much from them. And again, it's been a great ride, and I hope to keep riding it for as long as I can.
Yeah, that's why I do stuff like the card games, because we have this unique thing where we get to, you know, kind of the generation next hangs out with us now and things like that. So you get all these young distillers, and I'm like, man, I want 50 years from now, people like Freddie Noe that comes to these games, or you know, Jade Peterson. I want them telling stories about, man, we used to do this crazy stuff. There's this guy named Akley from St. Louis that would come in and we play cards. I just love that stuff, man. And I'm so envious of you got to be with all these great, you know, people from the bourbon industry. And I want to kind of keep that camaraderie going, that, you know, get together and yeah, you're competitors, but let's get together and have fun and do things like play cards or whatever it is we do. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the beauty of the industry, and part of what I've enjoyed about it over the years, Steve, is that not so much on the marketing and sales side, it can get pretty cutthroat, but on the operation side, you know, all in all, it's been a brotherhood and continues to be. You know, as it's grown, probably not so much as it used to be, but it's still a brotherhood. And if I ever had a a motor burnout that I didn't have a spare, I could call any distillery in Kentucky, and if they had it, they'd throw it in a truck and run it over to me, or vice versa. We helped each other out all the time. And so that's part of the beauty of it. We kind of look out after each other.
Yeah. Well, good. We've left some time here at the end for Q&A from the audience. What do you want to ask Gregg about? It can be about his career. It can be about the bourbon industry. It can be about the people. I know the Renner's asking for you to tell the Russell's Reserve story, in case anyone hasn't heard that one. Obviously, that's a unbelievable story, and it has to be a real source of pride for you. But in case anyone hasn't heard that one, tell us that one.
Okay, I can do that. Yeah. So I started with Pernod Ricard and Wild Turkey in March of 1998. I hadn't been there a month, and they asked me to take a look at their inventory. They thought they had too much whiskey in the inventory. And I said, well, I can do that. But I said, the first thing I need to know is what your sales forecasts are. And, back then we had Wild Turkey 80 proof, the Wild Turkey 101, which is the biggest volume of it. We had Rare Breed, we had Kentucky Spirit, and then we had some of the international, duty-free stuff that we produced as well. But so I said, well, I need to know what your sales forecast is. So they said, well, figure it out, 2% growth on all the brands out for the next 3 years. Yeah, so that's great. But I said, you've got some products that are 12 years old. I need to know out what your sales forecast is out at least 12 years, to do it properly. And he said, okay, well, just figure 2% growth on all the brands out for the next 12 years. So I did that. And I did this at Brown-Forman and a couple other places I've worked, but I built this simple Excel spreadsheet, and I call it a liquidation distillation model. Essentially what you do is you plug in your inventory by year of what you've got, your whiskey aging, and it factors in what your expected yield should be based on how old it is and how much evaporation it should have experienced in that time frame. And that converts it into proof gallons. And likewise, through the sales forecast, you're going to need X amount of cases of this, and this. And you tie that into proof gallons that you're going to need. And so it plugs it back into what you've got available and backs out that. And so at the end of this particular year, you'll see what you got left. And it goes out into the future. Well, likewise, as it goes out into the future, it tells you what you need to start producing and laying down for sales on out in future years as well. And so it's pretty simple. Like I said, pretty simple spreadsheet. So I did that and came back. I said, well, here's your answer. And I had a meeting in New York City at the corporate offices, and I used to get there about twice a month as it was, but had the executives there from Pernod Ricard and our finance folks and marketing folks. And I said, the answer is you don't have too much whiskey, but you got too much old whiskey. And they said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, what happens is, I said, the finance people in New York City are the ones calling the shots on what barrels the distillery pulls out to dump to bottle for all these products. Now, Wild Turkey 101 was 75 to 80% of the total volume. And the finance folks were always telling them to pull 6.5-year-old bourbon for the 101. Well, that's great, but 6.5, 7 years ago, they laid down a heck of a lot more whiskey than what they were bottling and selling currently. And so what happened was the next year would roll around and finance folks would say, well, that's another year older, so it's got more evaporation, less yield, and there's another year of ad valorem taxes. So all that's going to do is increase our component costs. And we can't increase our component costs. We got to keep our costs the same or lower. And so they just kind of sweep it under the rug. And so they started building an inventory, this older whiskey. And I said, number one, you need to move that function back to the plant and let the quality department and the people at the plant, taking all these into consideration, working within a budget to manage that part of the business. But you got to start using some of this older. You got to bite the bullet and start using some of this older whiskey. And so such a high percentage that you're going to dramatically change the taste profile. But you can use it in small enough percentages that you can use it up eventually and not over dramatically change the taste profile. So that's got to happen. Number two, I said, you can try to sell aged whiskey on the open market, but in 1998, nobody was buying aged whiskey. The market is nothing like it is today. It's tough finding good aged whiskey.
That'd be a gold mine, but yes.
No,
yeah.
Exactly. And so, but I said, the third option is, I said, we can start a new bourbon brand. And I said, it's high time this company paid tribute to one of the greatest master distillers that ever worked in this industry, and that's Jimmy Russell. And they said, yeah, that's a good idea. What do you think we should call it? And I said, well, for lack of a better term, I said, why don't we call it Russell's Reserve? And they said, yeah, we like it. Well, Jimmy didn't know anything about this, didn't know it at all. So the following week I was back in Kentucky and in my office. And I said, Jimmy, I always hooked up with Jimmy in the morning. I usually walked the distillery first thing I did before I even turned my computer on, and went and chatted with Jimmy for a little bit. And anyhow, I said, we've got some aged whiskey, some 10-year-old whiskey on the 4th floor of B Warehouse. How about grabbing a sample of that? And let's try that today. I said, the company's thinking about starting a new bourbon brand. I said, okay, I'll do that. So that day I had a meeting with the union, and we were wrapping things up, and I hear this knock on the door, and it's Jimmy. He opens the door. He said, Greg, got a minute? I said, yeah, come on in, Jimmy. We'll wrap it up. And so he brings in this snifter glass. He said, here's that sample you want to try, that bourbon on the 4th floor of B Warehouse. So I grabbed it out of his hand, and I got it about a foot away from my nose. And I mean, the caramel and vanilla about knocked my head off. I mean, it was a caramel bomb. It was so good. And then of course I tasted it, and it just confirmed everything that I smelled. It was phenomenal. And Jimmy said, yeah, that's pretty good bourbon. And again, he didn't know anything about this. So I worked with marketing and the finance folks and folks in New York. And the original package was the original tall Wild Turkey bottle.
Yeah.
And we bottled it at 101, and it said Wild Turkey Russell's Reserve on it. And it was absolutely delicious. And so later on, we kind of, when the time was right, we had a little presentation and kind of introduced Jimmy to the brand, and as his namesake. And he was pretty proud of that. He shed a couple tears and was quite humbled and quite proud. So that's how Russell's Reserve actually originated. And they've done a great job with the brand. They've gone off in different variations, and it's doing well. But for the price, the 10-year-old, original 10-year, of course, a couple years later, we had a change of marketing groups, and they thought the 101 proof was too high proof, which in today's marketing taste society, that's a little.
Wait a second. They thought about getting rid of Wild Turkey 101? Jesus.
Yeah.
Oh
well,
my God.
So you got to understand when Seagram's and Diageo.
That's iconic.
Well, Seagram's and Diageo acquired Seagram. Diageo and Pernod Ricard acquired Seagram's, right? Well, a lot of the Seagram folks in positions rolled into positions at Pernod Ricard, and so we had some of the marketing folks from Seagram's kind of roll into those positions, and they were of the opinion that the 101 Russell's was too high proof. So that's when they put it in the short, squatty bottle. Yep. It's in today, and they knocked it down to 90 proof. I mean, it's still, for the value, for the price, it's tough to beat. It's probably one of the best value bourbons you can find on the market. But so that's how Russell's was created.
As a guy who worked for Classic Wild Turkey, does every time does it break your heart when you see this bottle used to represent Kentucky Spirit, and now they got one they're printing out on a dot matrix printer in some intern's office? Yeah, it's horrible. The branding now is terrible on that brand.
It's sad. That bottle there, Steve, that's actually the second edition. The original Wild Turkey Kentucky Spirit had a silver type label, and then it had a pewter cork top on it. I don't know if you remember seeing any of those. I still got, I think, a bottle, but the top, that wooden, tan wood top, that part right there was pewter. I mean, you could put that thing in a sock and make a lethal weapon out of it. I mean, it was heavy. It was heavy.
That's cool. What does anybody want to ask Greg? Great opportunity. One of the legends.
Fire away, gang.
Fire away. What do you guys got?
Enjoy some more Righteous Blondes.
Yeah.
Greg, do you plan to be at the Bourbon Festival this year?
I don't know. I always loved the Bourbon Festival. I'll never forget the first one we had. It was just a kind of a get together at the gazebo of my old Kentucky home, where we all got together. We all brought bottles. We had some finger food and just like tonight, told stories and caught up with everybody. Just had a good time. But it's with COVID last year, and I don't know what the details are this year. I'll probably get down to Bardstown sometime that week, but I don't really have any plans to be involved with anything.
Hey, Greg, can I
Yes,
can I offer you an invitation to come to the Bourbon Festival and being my guest?
What depends on what day it is, I guess, Barry. I don't know.
Well, you could choose any day of the festival. We're Old William Tarr, RD1 Bourbon is going to be one of the education sponsors. So we're going to be a sponsor of the Bourbon Festival. I'd love for you to come down and present in the bourbon education tent. They're going to focus on Kentucky Bourbon Society groups. They're going to be doing tastings of single barrel picks that each of these groups have done and judge the winner. But I would love for you to come and present someday to the to that education tent. That'd be so cool.
Well, let me do this. I don't know if Steve, you got my email address, right?
I can do an email introduction to you guys after this event. Absolutely. So
why don't we do that? And Barry, if you don't mind, just send me some of the details and some of the dates and that, and I'll see what I can work out. I've got to do some promotional travel sometime in September. I just don't know when it's gonna fall out. But
awesome.
Yeah, I love the Bourbon Festival. Yeah.
Awesome. So Neil and Melody, I'll make sure I get them there for us.
Yeah, I'm going to be there too. I just want to hear more stories. Yeah. So that'll be cool. What else?
So Greg, Greg, you've done just about everything, it sounds like, in the bourbon industry. What is something left that you would still want to do? So you're a consultant now, right? You could basically consult on anything. What's left for you?
You know, that's a great question, actually. Again, I've been very blessed and worked in a number of different capacities for a number of different companies. And as I said, I've worked with some of the best people in the world. And, you know, I'm people ask me, you retired? I said, no, I'm semi-retired. You know, I don't have a lot of customers in my consulting by design. My wife's had some health issues, so I try to keep myself fairly flexible to you know, take care of what she needs and what have you. But aside from that, you know, with Chicken Cock whiskey, and I'm working with a couple other distilleries as well, that I'm able to take my 43 years of knowledge and experience and focus it on a brand or brands. Because like I said, I got a couple other clients that I'm going to be doing something similar for. But in my role of master distiller at Chicken Cock, I mean, I'm able to take that and really focus it. And as I said, we're doing something unique with Chicken Cock whiskey that I'm not aware of anybody else doing in the industry, where I have total oversight from the bark to the barrel to the bourbon to the bottle. I mean, I'm there to oversee it all, from selecting the logs to overseeing the quarter sawing of the staves and heading, to overseeing the production, construction of the barrel. I ensure every barrel is toasted properly. I ensure every barrel is charred properly. And then I go to Bardstown when they're going to make our bourbon or our rye, and I oversee the process there as well. So, you know, it's the beauty of Bardstown Bourbon Company. They have a collaborative distillation program where I provided them with our mash bills. You know, our bourbon mash bills are 70, 21, 9, 70 corn, 21 rye, and 9% malted barley. But I also give them all the work instructions. I gave them the time and temperatures I want to cook the grains at, any enzymes I want to use. I give them all the specifications for fermentation, the beer chemistry, the distillation. And then again, I select the barrel. So I'm having fun doing that. It doesn't require a heck of a lot of time because we're not making a whole lot of bourbon. This year we made 1,000 barrels of bourbon and 200 barrels of rye. And so it's life's good, man. Life's good. I don't know that there's anything, you know, for years I've had in various capacities. I've had master distillers that had worked for me and worked with, and to be able to kind of take my knowledge and experience and kind of channel it towards a brand or brands, it's gratifying.
I bet. What else do you guys want to know? Anything? Any people you want to know about? I wasn't able to stump Greg with any of them. He got all of them. He had stories about everybody I had on my list today.
I've always been curious, you know, listening to the history of bourbon and what actually managed to survive by superhuman effort and a lot of luck getting through the harder times of bourbon's history. Is there any brand or product or distillery that didn't make it that you think would, you know, you'd love to see come back, make a resurgence, do something?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's a lot of them, actually. You know, when I started with Seagram's in 1978, June of 1978. And right before I started there, Seagram's had 4 country distilleries in Kentucky, and they had the distillery there in Louisville, which I worked at. They had one in Cynthiana, Kentucky. They had one in Fairfield, Kentucky, which was the Henry McKenna distillery. They had one in Athertonville, Kentucky. And they had the one in Lawrenceburg, Kentucky, which was the Old Prentice, or now is the Four Roses. So Four Roses is the only one of those 5 that still remains. The Henry McKenna, when I mentioned earlier, when I worked at Seagram's, we produced and bottled Eagle Rare. The Eagle Rare 101 in the shorter bottle. It was in a wooden box. I mean, it was fabulous with bourbon. I mean, it was just delicious. Henry McKenna, everything came out of that Fairfield, the original Henry McKenna distillery that the Seagram's owned. Again, when they had shut it down right before I started working there, but we still had barrels that were aging that we bottled that were absolutely phenomenal. Benchmark, we own Benchmark. When Benchmark back in the late 70s, early 80s, you weren't going to find a better bourbon on the shelf. It was so good, so good. But of course, it's different owners now, different mash bills and what have you. And I don't know, I haven't tried Benchmark in many, many years, but I can tell you the old stuff, the original stuff was something phenomenal.
Yeah, relegated to the bottom shelf now, which is just terrible. So some of the new ones, if you go to Indiana, which you live in Indiana, right? So the bottled and bond one, actually, we did a bottled and bond thing, a blind tasting, and check out the Benchmark bottled and bond. It actually is pretty good. So actually,
I've heard it's the same mash bill as Stag, so just younger whiskey, I'm guessing. Or I don't know what the differences are. But.
Yeah, that makes sense. What else you guys want to know? Anything?
I'm always curious to know if what kind of had the first spark that got you interested in whiskey. Like, was it something like with, a parent that you like enjoyed from a young age, kind of like seeing them enjoy whiskey, or what is it that kind of got you into, I almost said drinking from a young age. Was it your first drink at 3 years old that really got you hooked?
Well, no, actually, Katie, I was weaned on bourbon. So actually, no, my dad was a bourbon drinker. He loved good bourbon. And that's what I learned when I started in the industry. I'd bring bottles of Eagle Rare, or Henry McKenna, or Benchmark home, and man, he just absolutely loved it. But no, it's just one of those leaps of faith, I guess. I went to Indiana University and have a business degree. And your senior year, the companies come and they work through the career placement department, and back then they posted on the wall of companies that were wanting to interview graduates for positions. And so, I'd go down there and I'd sign up for several interviews. Well, one of the interviews was with Seagram's, goes to be Seagram & Son, and they had a plant in Louisville, Kentucky at that time. And so I had the interview, and luck would have it, that's one of the job opportunities I got when I graduated. And I actually had 3 different job opportunities. And I thought, you know what? And they, as far as pay, I think they were pretty equivalent. I was making $13,500 when I started with Seagram's in 1978. So that was big money, and I felt pretty lucky. But yeah, it's one of those things that I said, just you have this feeling. That's what I want to try. And my dad was a businessman. He worked for Pillsbury, actually, and so I wanted to kind of be a businessman. That kind of pushed me along that line, where I have brother and sister that were teachers, but teachers didn't make enough money for me. I was more focused on making big bucks someday, but that's kind of what the direction I went into, and no regrets whatsoever. I mean, I wasn't in it very long, and I said, this is my life's calling. This is what I want to do. And as I said earlier, I have been very blessed, very fortunate to move around and work for different companies. And it's funny, I'm a big believer that things happen for a reason, and everything that's ever happened to me in this industry has kind of led to bigger, better things and better opportunities. And so I'm very fortunate in that regard.
Yeah. Danny, who's been popping in and out of here, the guy who's in the car, looks like he's dropped off right now, but he was in Wisconsin just last weekend, and he found a decanter at a antique store of Eagle Rare 101, an old Seagram's one. And Greg, don't you think, as Danny pops back in here, don't you think Danny needs to offer that to us and we do an event around opening that thing up and tasting that thing? Don't you think? I mean, he needs to give that up. He paid like $40 for that or something. He paid the decanter price for that thing, for a full decanter, tax stamp on it and everything.
Wow. Wow. That's amazing. You know, that's one of the few decanters we did. Every year we do a different Eagle for the Eagle Rare. And, you know, every year was something special, but we did all the decanters there at the Louisville facility as well. Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah. So Danny, if you're listening now, I don't know, you're back on here. You need to hand that decanter over to us, and we're gonna do an event around that. So yeah, we'll give you your $40 back or whatever it is. So you're okay there, and we'll give you a free ticket to the event. How's that sound?
You got my vote for that.
What? Danny, we're talking about the decanter you found in Wisconsin or wherever it was when you were up on that vacation you were on, and you found it in an antique store. So we decided we're going to do an event around that. Okay. I'll actually, when you get back in town, I'll come up and pick that thing up. All right. What else? Questions for Greg? Anything else? Danny sounds like he's committed to it. So
we've heard about how great some of these older bourbons were. And Greg, you got to experience that from firsthand knowledge, that evolution over your 43 years. What would you attribute either the change or the quality differences between when you would describe like how great that Eagle Rare or the original Russells or anything like that were to where they are now? What do you think has been one of those?
Why is that old whiskey so good? Yeah.
Yeah. Why is it so good?
You know, there's, I guess that could be debated, you know, 8 days a week if you wanted to do it, but because there's some fabulous whiskeys out there again today, but you know, I've heard a number of theories on that. One of the theories that I think may have some validity is the entry proof. You know, back in 1978, when I started in the industry, the entry proof, most companies were going in anywhere from 100 to 110 proof going into the barrel. Now, the philosophy is that let's dilute the grain flavors, because the barrel is going to give it, like I said, 60 to 70% of the flavor to actually come out of that white oak barrel. So let's dilute the grain flavors so that when it picks up all those great flavors through the maturation process of going in and out of the wood, then we don't have to add that much water to dilute it to get it down to the bottling proof, be it 86 or 90 proof, or you know, a lot of them were 80 proof back then, 80, 86. So you don't have to add a lot of water to get it down to the finished bottling proof. And so you're not diluting all those great flavors that it picked up out of the barrel. Now, the flip side of that is that if you go in up to 125, as the government allows you to, you know, in today's market especially, so many more whiskeys are being offered and bottled at such higher proofs that, you know, that doesn't really hold water, so to speak. I'm a big believer that, you know, number one, you can't make a silk purse out of a sow's ear, okay? I don't know if you've heard that saying or not, but if that whiskey's not good, okay, it's before your time. I'm sorry.
I'm fine.
So what that means is that if that whiskey's not good going in the barrel, it's not going to be, I don't care how great that barrel is, it's not going to be good coming out. It's got to be good when you make it and it goes in that barrel. So for chicken cock, what we're doing is we're actually coming off the still a little bit lower than a lot of companies. I'm able to clean it up. I'm coming off the low wine at 120 proof, and the high wine's coming off at 130. A lot of them are more towards 140, but I want to come off at 130 because then I'm going to dilute it only 5 proof points. I'm putting it in a barrel at 125. Okay. Now, the reason I'm doing that, I think the foundation of any great bourbon is you want that grain flavor. You want the corn, you want the rye or wheat, whatever your base is, and malted barley. That gives you the good foundation. And then you let that barrel do its magic. Okay. And then, as I said, so many more bourbons nowadays are coming off at higher proofs that you're not really diluting the flavor once you pick up all those great flavors. So again, there's different theories out there. That may be one of it. I think some of the equipment back many years ago, I think most of the distilleries, their stills were 100% copper, where nowadays a lot of them are stainless steel with the top section being copper. You know, they're more resilient. When I worked at Wild Turkey, we had a 40-foot high still, 4-foot diameter, and it was solid copper. Well, every 9 to 10 years, we had to take the roof off the still house and bring a crane out there and pull off, unbolt it, because it's sectioned, and pull off section at a time, because the mash flowing through there 9 to 10 years, that copper was so paper thin. Copper's a soft metal. It was so paper thin. But I think with having copper throughout the entire still, you're stripping out a lot of those undesirable phenolic compounds, the sulfuric compounds and some of the aldehydes that you're trying to strip out anyway with the copper. And it just gives you more exposure for that filtration process. So again, there's a lot of different theories. I've heard a lot of different people talk about it, but it's hard to put your finger on. But man, some of those older whiskeys were phenomenal.
Yeah. For sure. It's amazing that, the taste of some of those older whiskeys and, one of the things too, that it throws you off is those older whiskeys are 80 proof, 86 proof, yeah, they're not, today we're drinking, 115 proof, higher proof. But you drink some of those old ones and they've got a nice finish. They've got a nice taste. It's just a totally different ballgame, that older whiskey.
Yeah, you're right, Steve. I mean, back in 1978, I think everything that we did was, except for the Eagle Rare being 101, everything else was 80 or 86,
Yeah.
That was a common proof.
Yeah. You just don't find those old Dusties to be higher proof, but the flavor's there. It's
well, and back to Evan's question, one of the things that happened, you got to remember, when I got in 1978, the industry was on a decline already. Not rapid, but it was declining. And it bottomed out in the 1980s. And now to see it surge the way it's gone, it's so gratifying. I love it. And, hope I got another 40 years to put in it. But one of the things that happened was that it was declining and sales were going down. And so the finance groups and every company kind of took hold of the reins. And most of those companies that were putting it in at 100 to 110 proof, at Seagram, we put in, our entry proof was 105. And next thing you know, finance is looking, okay, we need to look at ways we can cut costs and improve our margins because our sales are declining. Well, one of the things they did, one of the immediate things they did, and I saw it happen when I was at Wild Turkey, we were putting it in at 110. Well, kind of the same thing after the Seagram acquisition. Some of the Seagram folks got involved in the equation, and they decided to increase the entry proof. Well, instead of 110, next thing you know, it goes up to 125 because you still call it bourbon. When you go up to 125, now you're getting a lot more cases out of the same barrel. So you have to buy less barrels, more cases per barrel, less aging, less labor to age it. I mean, just it really, you look at the cost aspect of it, and it really helps reduce the cost. A lot of different things like that. They had all kinds of cost saving items and mechanisms that we went through, and it was a pretty dramatic change.
Finance, marketing, and accounting screwed us.
It did. Absolutely did. As they always do.
How you look at it.
Yeah.
We got time for one more question. Anybody got one more question want to finish on?
Greg, what's the timeline on that the rum cast finished rye?
So we just put it in May, and it's going to be. I'm going to sample it every couple months, okay, just to see. I think it's going to be at least 12 months, but probably closer to 18 months before it'll be ready. With a rum barrel, it takes a little longer to get that infusion. And as I said earlier, I don't want to overpower the flavor of the rye. I want to enhance the flavor of the rye with just enough sweetness that complements the spiciness and the peppery notes of the rye. And so I'll be tasting it, every couple months. Matter of fact, Saturday is 1 month because it went in May 12th is when those barrels were filled. So probably within the next couple of weeks, I'll go down and pull a sample and just see how it's progressing in the first month. But I'm guessing based on experience, it's going to be at least 12 to 18 months and maybe longer, but hopefully we can achieve our goal in that time frame.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah. Yeah, if you ever need help sampling and tasting, let us
Exactly.
know. Yeah, we've got plenty
I was
of.
gonna offer that.
Yeah.
Kentucky,
And-
so we're close by.
Yeah. And if you like going to Key West, we got a big group going to Key West in January.
yeah.
Please join us, Greg. Yeah.
Ought to join us.
We'd love to have you if you're interested in heading down there with us. Got a lot of people from the bourbon industry coming, so should be fun.
Cool.
With that, we'll go ahead and stop the recording and appreciate Greg. Let's hear a round of applause for Mr. Gregg Snyder for a great event, sharing some whiskey and telling us some very cool stories. So thanks a lot,
My
Greg.
pleasure,
Really appreciate
gang.
it, man. Yeah.
My pleasure. Thank you so
Yeah.
much for the invitation, and I had fun. I always love talking whiskey.
Oh, this
Great
is
stuff.
fantastic.
It was fantastic. It was a great one for sure. Thanks, guys.
All right.
Take care, everybody.
gang.
All right.
Bye-bye.